The Prowler, Part 13. I stood there staring at my lovely bride-to-be, filled with a heart-stopping dread, hoping I wouldn't have to do the unthinkable to my love. It all depended on her next actions. How would she react? I pleaded and begged in my mind as she stared back at me, giving me a once-over. I do not want to kill her. Just then she spoke. I had my suspicions, my dear. There were just too many coincidences of people dying when we were together. The waiter who spilled soup on me, the head inspector meeting his demise after the party a few weeks ago, and the maid Liza going missing and later being found dead, horrifically murdered. I had a feeling you were the prowler who's been going around savagely murdering the West End citizens. This might not seem proper or ladylike. At first I might have been taken aback when I first had my notions that you were the prowler. But whatever hesitancy or fear I felt quickly disappeared. I've never loved you more than I do at this very moment. It's actually quite arousing knowing that my future husband is the notorious prowler. A great relief washed over me like a waterfall. I stuffed the gardener's eyeballs in my pocket and rushed over to my bride. We embraced and I kissed her, and even though I am a gentleman and usually don't disclose such information, I must say we proceeded to make animalistic love on the hay pile in the corner of the stables. We took our time, not caring if anyone discovered us in the throes of ecstasy. But I couldn't take all night. We didn't want to be found with the corpse of the gardener on the other side of the room, after all. Plus, I mustn't be found out. No one else can know I am the prowler. Only my bride may know this secret. We finished our night of passion and escaped the stables undetected. We went back inside to the ball that was winding down to make a final appearance. No one seemed to notice our absence. We took to the dance floor like we never left and danced the night away in our macabre lover's embrace. When the evening came to a close, I ushered her down the front steps of the manor to her awaiting carriage. Even though we were surrounded by exiting party guests, we could only see one another, transfixed in each other's gaze, consumed in our lover's world. We agreed to meet in 2 days' time to have an in-depth conversation of my prowler activities and start preparations for our wedding. We kissed goodnight, and I watched as she was driven away in her carriage. What a great Hallows Eve night it turned out to be. The ball was a success. I did some killing and made love to my future bride. My head hit the pillow with the softest of ease, and my eyes closed quickly to put an end to a beautiful night. Of course, hours later my beautiful slumber was disturbed by screams of terror. Sounds like somebody found the gardener, I said to myself sarcastically, before turning over and going back to sleep. I'll let Father handle the situation this time. I'm very tired, and a gentleman such as myself needs a proper amount of sleep. I was awoken a few hours later as James brought in the morning cup of coffee and paper. Even in my still slumberous state, I could tell something was off with James. He walked over to the side of the bed and slammed the tray with the coffee and paper on my lap. Have you gone mad? You big dumb bastard. What in the hell do you think you're doing? I screamed furiously. He stood there shaking and had the nerve to tell me I was becoming reckless with my murderous pursuits, that he was afraid that we were going to get caught. I barked back at him that everything will be fine. We won't get caught if you just keep your damn mouth shut and keep your bloody cool. I ordered him to leave my presence, that the sight of him was making me sick. He turned and walked out, mumbling a name under his breath. It sounded like Liza. It looks like I'm going to have to dispose of my trusty chauffeur, I thought as I unfurled the paper. Oh well, I'll worry about that later. As I gazed upon the front page of the London Journal, the headline caught my attention. 2 potential Prowler witnesses found murdered on Burlington estate grounds. The 2 potential Prowler witnesses who were under the employ of the Burlington family and who claimed to have witnessed, in some fashion, the death of Police Commissioner Nigel Burlington's wife Agatha and a stable hand just a few short nights ago, were both themselves found savagely slain. The maid, a Mrs. Gertrude Steinbottoms, was found on the outskirts of the woods. A knife had been driven into her skull, and her ears were removed as the Prowler's trophies. It was said she was heading into the city to pick up food and other goods for a costumed affair the Burlingtons held last night at their manor. She never reached her destination. Meanwhile, the gardener, a Mr. Joseph Wilkins, was found brutally murdered in the stables, having his eyes removed as trophies in the process. And like the other past victims, the Prowler's poem was left atop their bodies like a macabre calling card. I had the privilege to speak to the Earl of Burlington when I arrived at the scene this morning. He understandably didn't offer much, but his dismay at another death occurring at his lovely home, and wanted to offer his deepest condolences to the victims' loved ones. His 2 sons, Police Commissioner Nigel and the Earl-in-Waiting Neville, could not be reached at this time for further comments. What sad state of affairs we live in, dear readers, where a respected, long-lasting family of the peerage must suffer through so much death and carnage. When will this madness all end? Until tomorrow, dear readers, stay safe out there. Well, well, they discovered old Gertrude. About damn time, you incompetent pricks. Just 2 more victims to add to my ever-growing impressive list. I then flipped over to the society section of the paper, and my Hallows Eve ball was in the headlines as a smashing success. I was atop the headlines in 2 sections of the paper and couldn't even enjoy it, because I was starting to lose my temper from how James spoke to me earlier. No one speaks to me in that fashion. No one who intends to keep their life, that is. Who does that drunkard think he is, speaking to me like that? I am his better. I should be spoken to with respect. I think tonight I will take to the streets once again. I must release this fury on some unsuspecting soul. I must quench this bloodlust. I prepared myself for the day and went down to breakfast, and as I made my way down the stairs, I beheld a beautiful sight. Pure sadness and melancholy. No smiles, no bubbly personalities greeting me in this early hour, just somber hellos. I guess it takes me killing a few people around here to get what I want. I sat down at the table, and once again I was greeted with my father and brother looking like some droopy-faced hounds. I wanted to shout, "Cheer up, gentlemen! No use crying over spilled milk!" It is just the help after all. I must say, I was quite famished this morning. I needed to eat a proper breakfast and build up strength for tonight's excursion as well. Mr. Lyles put before me some fresh country ham, accompanied with sausage and eggs, and fresh biscuits. A proper hearty breakfast for a proper gentleman, as myself. The meal was finished with a cup of coffee and a plate of spotted dicks. I quickly wrapped up breakfast after dessert, for father and brother were starting to lament over the recent deaths, and I for one hadn't the time for that shite. I made my way up to my chambers and prepared my instruments. I spent the next hour scrubbing and fine-cleaning my tools of the trade, so much so that you could eat a 5-course meal with them and not give it a second thought. I then adorned my evening attire, complete with my cloak, top hat, and white gloves. I grabbed my black bag, then bounded down the stairs into the waiting carriage outside. "To the West End, James, and be quick about it," I shouted, not even bothering looking towards his direction as I entered the carriage. I was still filled with a pure disgust for the simple bastard from earlier in the day. We finally arrived about a half hour later at the old familiar corner of Denmark Street. I exited the carriage and turned and looked at James. "Have the carriage standing by. No fuck-ups, you drunkard, for you do not want to face my wrath," I growled at him. I then proceeded down Denmark Street. What carnage I've spilt on these cobblestone streets. Lives I have altered with each swipe from my blade. Just then I took a deep breath, taking in the cool night London air. I'm home, I thought. My trance of nostalgia was broken by a lady of the night, walking about, advertising her servicements, if you will, to the scant public that was moving about the street. I stood and watched. There seemed to be no takers, and not to seem rude, but looking at her condition and the state she was in, I could see why. I could see her disappointment strewn across her face as she received no interest, and followed as she shuffled down the alleyway. I stalked her like a predator stalks its prey in the jungle. I pulled my hatchet this time from the bag. It's time to get messy tonight. As I got closer to her, I thought I could hear weeping. I placed my hand on her shoulder and spun her around. "Let me put you out of your misery, my dear," I said with a sarcastic tone, as I brought my arm down, burying the hatchet in her forehead. Her body dropped to its knees instantly. It took some doing and some extra force, but I was finally able to extract the hatchet from her skull after a few moments of difficulties. I then took my time and performed an amateur autopsy, removing the parts she was intending to sell as my trophies. I then placed my poem upon her mutilated corpse and made my way back to the carriage. When I returned to the end of the street, I expected to see James in the carriage waiting for me, like always, but this time it was not. I stood there waiting, for mere minutes, yes, but it seemed like hours. I just killed someone, damn it. I haven't the time or luxury of just hanging about. As my blood was beginning to reach a boiling point, I saw the carriage come into view. I quickly got in and ordered him to take us home. I tried calming myself on the ride back, but as we arrived back home, I bursted out of the carriage and pulled James down from the driver's seat and dragged him inside the carriage. I slapped him across the face and shouted, "What the hell is wrong with you?" I could have been spotted just standing on the corner, standing there for minutes, trying to dodge and hide my face from passerbys. I'm the fucking Earl in waiting to House Burlington, James. How would it look for me to be seen a mere block away from the latest Prowler victim? Are you trying to get me caught? He began to mumble his reasoning. He wanted to keep the carriage out of sight until my return. I slapped him again. That was not my order. Incompetence or stupidity will get you nowhere, James. He then began to cry and apologize. Then out of nowhere, said maybe we should get caught. All of this carnage must end. We deserve to pay for our crimes. I leaned closer and smelled the alcohol emanating from his breath. He then uttered Liza, my poor Liza, over and over again. I sat back and said, so that's it, James. It's the spirits talking. You're quite the capable, trusty fellow, but get that booze in you, and you're all 6s and 7s. I reached into my bag and pulled out some of the fresh entrails I just collected from that streetwalker, and I threw it in his face, smearing it all around, some of it even getting in his mouth. I then reached for my blade and brought it to his throat. Don't you ever fucking threaten me or speak to me like you did earlier again. You'll follow orders that are given to you, when they are given to you. You are my servant. I am your better, and you will do your damnedest to remember that. It shouldn't be hard to forget. There will be no more screw-ups, and there will be no more mentioning of Liza. Listen to these words carefully, James, for I am the bringer of death, and will dispose of you without a second thought. I will gladly add your name to the lists of victims. Now take your ass to your quarters and sleep it off. I require your services tomorrow, I said threateningly. I gathered my things and went to my chambers. I stored my trophies away, and after a long trying day, I crawled into bed, anxious to end the day and start tomorrow so I could see my love once again. I laid there for a moment and thought, I know I'll have to dispose of James. 'Tis a shame, really. Such a trusted employee at one time. Oh well, I'll start interviewing new chauffeurs tomorrow. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.